I started recording this video a couple days ago, but my 6-month-old producer does not always come to work with the same kind of deadline concerns that I have. The more extreme communities that have sprung up among its users. Okay, come on. And just as I was recording it, this tweet popped up. Of course, this is kind of old news now, but just to refresh your memory, it says, from Donald Trump's Twitter account, "I want to thank Emily Murphy at GSA for her steadfast dedication and loyalty to our country. She has been harassed, threatened, and abused, and I do not want to see this happen to her, her family, or employees of GSA. Our case strongly continues. We will keep up the good fight, and I believe we will prevail. Nevertheless, in the best interest of our country, I am recommending that Emily and her team do what needs to be done with regard to initial protocols, and have told my team to do the same." Now, of course, that was a few days ago. The most recent tweet, as of the recording of this video right now, is rigged election, which the Twitter folks have flagged with an exclamation point saying this claim about election fraud is disputed. What those two tweets reflect, which actually was something I was going to put in my initial video before they were out there in the Twitter sphere, is this: that even if President Trump continues to say that the election was rigged and he never says the words "I concede," that I also did not believe that there is going to be some kind of military coup, as many have been hysterically complaining about on the internet. In fact, I was going to say that if there is in fact a military coup, I will eat McDonald's live on this channel. And I have not eaten McDonald's in like 15 years. And my husband still eats McDonald's despite my dire contempt for it. I find receipts under notebooks as he hides his addiction to McDonald's. But I would have eaten McDonald's for you. That is how firmly I believe that there is not going to be a military coup. Now, that said, I was paying attention to that hysteria because I believe you will see renewed calls for an even greater lockdown of information on these social media sites, more censorship, because what people are going to say is we just barely by the skin of our teeth missed a dictator taking over. We barely saved our democracy. We barely escaped authoritarianism, and we have to act fast and strong in order to prevent anything like this from happening again in the future. And the way we're going to do that in part is we're going to lock down misinformation online. Mark my words, I truly believe this is going to happen. Now, before I get started with this video and show you kind of an example of the teeing up for this argument, don't forget, you can support my work. There are links in the description, but it also really just helps if you like, share, and comment, and make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. This is an article that was trending on Reddit before the news broke. It's from The Atlantic. It's titled, "Right-Wing Social Media Finalizes Its Divorce from Reality. Fox News acknowledged Trump's loss. Facebook and Twitter crack down on election lies, but true believers can get their misinformation elsewhere," by Renee DiResta, technical research manager at the Stanford Internet Observatory. The article opens when Fox News called Arizona for Democrat Joe Biden shortly after the polls closed there on election night. Right-wing social media erupted in fury. Goes on to detail these hashtags that were used: boycott Fox News, dump Fox News, fake Fox News is dead, and Fox News sucks. In response, pro-Trump influencers exhorted their followers to congregate on Parler, which tells users to, quote, "speak freely and express yourself openly without fear of being deplatformed for your views." Goes on to talk about some of the stuff that Trump said on Twitter, and goes on to also talk about how the major social media platforms crack down on that and how that's a good thing. So, quote, "The major social media platforms, which for years boosted sensational propaganda and Trump-friendly conspiracy theories such as QAnon, have been remarkably active and admirably transparent in preventing the spread of misinformation about the 2020 election. As the president continues to rail against his loss on Twitter, the mainstream social platforms have continued to label wild claims and false allegations and reduce their spread. Facebook has taken down some of the more extreme communities that have sprung up among its users. Yet reducing the supply of misinformation doesn't eliminate the demand." She then goes on to say that these major social media platforms have recognized such dangerous implications and real-world consequences for this misinformation spreading online that they are going to be going after it with an even heavier hand, because she says here that how far these ideas spread depends in part on whether mainstream social media outlets keep moderating content as closely as they did during this election season. For most of Trump's term, Facebook and others had been loath to crack down on even baseless conspiracy theories, including those repeated by the president himself. Freedom of expression, the argument went, covers the right to think and say even floridly false things, which were best addressed through corrections and counterspeech. Yet the major platforms concluded that misleading theories about the election were a distinct class of misinformation because of their potential to cause significant harm to the body politic. As the split between reality-based information outlets and those catering to pro-Trump bitter enders has widened, the distribution of their content is becoming significantly siloed. It's so telling to me that she uses the phrase reality-based information outlets, because that's exactly how people in the established power structure see themselves. And everybody else on the outside apparently is suffering from psychosis. So if you are part of Facebook or Twitter or the New York Times or MSNBC or Fox News or one of these mainline established news organizations, you're not just an establishment mainline mainstream outlet. You are now the reality-based news outlet. You are based in reality. Everybody else, I don't know. They're living in la la land. These are just a couple other articles written by the same author. The right's disinformation machine is getting ready for Trump to lose, and the supply of disinformation will soon be infinite. You see how this language is used? Like, there's so much of it. It's infinite. It's such a big problem. The campaigns are underway. We're never going to get out from under it. And the more you sort of see this language being used, the more that there is sort of this necessitation of then some kind of gatekeeper or babysitter who's going to come in and save us all from the boogeyman outside, who is ripping us from this world of reality into this illusion of fantasy where we're all going to eventually implode because of our inability to see truth from fiction. And that's why we need some kind of Superman to come in and save us from ourselves. Here's the problem, though. Who's going to be the gatekeeper? Who's going to be the gatekeeper? Is it going to be the government? Is it going to be Silicon Valley? Do you trust them? For instance, here's an article about Stanford University where this person is employed by CNBC. The title is "Stanford is number one on our list of the top U.S. colleges that pay off. Here's why." Scroll down, you learn something very interesting, talking about the connection between Stanford and Silicon Valley. Located in Stanford, California, near Silicon Valley, the school has deep ties to the tech industry. Talks about the people who graduated in electrical engineering from Stanford in 1935 and turned their research into the company today known as HP in 1939. That would be William Hewlett and David Packard. It goes on also to say in 1994, Jerry Yang and David Filo co-created what would become Yahoo. Yang and his wife, also a Stanford alum, pledged $75 million to the university. Another couple of guys co-founded Google in 1998 after meeting in 1995 based on a search algorithm they developed while studying at Stanford. Over the years, Google has donated millions to the university, and according to ProPublica, Stanford has made hundreds of millions of dollars selling Google stock that it received as payment for allowing Google to use technology developed at Stanford. The co-founders of Instagram, chairman and CEO of Netflix, co-founder and executive chairman of LinkedIn are all among Stanford's successful alumni with connections to the tech industry. And the tech industry, Stanford alums don't just give back to the university, they also hire Stanford graduates. So you have this Stanford employee who also works on policy with government officials, and you now know that Stanford has these extremely lucrative relationships with Silicon Valley. So let me leave the question with you. Who ends up being the gatekeeper for the internet? Is it you? Are you going to have the opportunity to democratically vote who gets to decide what's true and what's false? Or does it appear that it potentially ends up becoming a small group of very powerful people, whether in the government, whether in Silicon Valley, whether they're all working together, that's going to then start framing our discourse? And they're going to use fear to do it. Because who would submit to having some kind of oligarchy determine for you what you can and cannot say, unless you are so terribly afraid that if you didn't do that, the world around you as you know it would be over? So I'm curious, what do you think? What do you think about all of this? Do you think there's a line in the sand? Do you think that we should have some kind of sort of we get to this point and now we really got to lock it down because it's just starting to get too dangerous? Or is it no censorship at all costs? Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Don't forget, you can support my work with the links in the description. There's Patreon, there's PayPal, but it really does help if you just engage with the content, comment, like, share, make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you next time.